Dear friend, before we jump into today's episode, I want to say a huge thank you to BCS Publishing, who are part of the Chartered Institute for IT and are chief collaborators of the podcast.
I've literally spent the last 9 years explaining blockchain to people because with my accounting brain and my tech brain, I know what it is. Cryptocurrency started probably late 1970s. The first time somebody paid for a thing with Bitcoin was reportedly 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin in 2010. We're not going to be buying our coffee with Bitcoin. Let's put it that way.
From the city of Peaky Blinders, Birmingham, England, I would like to introduce you to Paddy Danda.
As the world becomes more automated and the robots take over, it's imperative that we build the right human skills for the future. So pull up a chair, grab a samosa or two, and make yourself very uncomfortable. They say money makes the world go round, and it's traditionally been exchanged in the form of notes and coins. But in the new digital world we live in, there's a new form of currency that's reshaping our understanding of financial transactions, known as cryptocurrency. In this episode, I'm joined by Kate Baucherel, who is a distinguished author, speaker, and consultant with expertise in blockchain and cryptocurrency. With over 30 years of experience in various industries, Kate is the author of Blockchain Hurricane and her new book titled Getting Started with Cryptocurrency. She is also a frequent speaker at global events and a recognized cryptocurrency expert on BBC Radio. So Kate, lovely to have you on the show. I would love to know what superpower you'd like to bring to this particular episode.
Hello, lovely to be here, Paddy. Oh, I like to tell stories about technology so that people understand what's coming at them from the future.
Whoa, that's quite deep. That's quite deep. I like deep. So we're going to explore that much more in a moment. And I hear you are an author and you love books.
Yep.
So again, we'll talk more about that in a moment. But I want to know what's led you to this moment. What has led you to discover these passions of yours? And it'd be great to hear a little bit about your journey.
Oh, well, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool geek. So I started watching Doctor Who from behind the sofa when I was 5 years old. And I always wanted to be an astronaut. And then I discovered that because I had glasses, that wasn't going to be a thing. And I ended up as an accountant. But I hated my accounting degree and I went off to America in a sort of fit of slight rebellion and worked for an IT company. And this was back in, believe it or not, 1988, when we had the mighty AS400 that was the mainframe for the 21st century, because it actually had internet connectivity. This is 7 years before we get the World Wide Web. So I'm used to, by this time, emailing people, messaging people from other sites, and I'm used to this communication. And I come back to the UK and I land a job as an accountant because I had to, but they wanted help with understanding how to work their AS400. So I spent half of my time being an accountant and half of my time in IT. So I worked my way all the way through. My last accounting role was CFO for part of ITV, but I always did the tech as well. So when I finally admitted that I liked the tech probably better than the numbers, I pivoted into doing websites and running a little software company. And then one day somebody said, I'm not going to use your software. I'm going to use Ethereum. And I said, what's Ethereum? And this was 2015 when Ethereum, so the second big cryptocurrency, had just come out of its sandbox and it was just starting to make waves. So I went and looked at it and I went, well, this is really easy. It's a ledger. Everybody gets this, don't they? And there was just this tumbleweed. And so I've literally spent the last 9 years explaining blockchain to people because with my accounting brain and my tech brain, I know what it is. And along that journey, when I was explaining tech to people and I was really starting to get to grips with where my journey had taken me by then, somebody said to me, could you write a book on cybersecurity with me? And I, well, sure, no problem at all. And then after a couple of lunches and coffee, he said, could you do it as fiction? And I said, don't be silly. I can't write fiction. And he nagged me for 8 months and would not give me anything to write a non-fiction book with. So I ended up just started writing, wrote sort of 300 words and said, like this? And he said, yeah, keep writing. So I ended up with my tech knowledge, my accounting knowledge, my growing understanding of all these new emerging technologies, and then building that all into some near future novels. As I'm working on the 6th one at the moment, so that didn't go away very quickly. And so I love communicating and telling stories. And sometimes those stories are real, like what happens if we throw all this into the future and just see what breaks? And some of them are really serious, present day. Exactly what have we got? What's this gem that we've got that we're going to be able to exploit and change our worlds, our societies, our behavior with? So I have a lot of fun.
I can tell. And I know we talked very briefly about the theme of the podcast, and I mentioned superpowers, and you pulled up one of those little pop dolls that you've got there. And so you've got that kind of playful side, which I love. I was going to explore a little bit more about the way that you've brought some of your passions together with the expertise that you have in terms of your job, because I speak to a lot of people and they generally say, well, I'm one of these, and that's their box. And we all kind of pigeonhole ourselves into a box. And when people ask me, I tell them about 10 different things. I'm like, I love to doodle and I do agile. Oh, I also do podcasting. And there's these other things. I love to play with Lego. And there's all of these passions that all start coming out. And then the other person regrets asking me because they're like, so what do you actually do? Because that's really what they want to know. But I think we've all got so much more to us than just our jobs. How have you brought all that together? Like, did you do that in a sort of intentional way, or was it being accidental? And what advice would you have for others that are out there?
Well, I would say it was actually accidental, and it's accidental in not a particularly good way, to be fair. So I got made redundant when the company I was CFO for was taken over. It was sold by ITV. And when you've got a board of women in the north of England and a board of men in London, you've got a fair idea that you need to check your redundancy clauses. So it was accidental that I ended up running sort of software tech companies. And it was partly to do with the fact that at that point I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. And in the following 7 years, we lost every single person in the generation above us. So I was juggling children, caring, funerals, and I couldn't hold down a job. I literally couldn't have held down a 9-to-5 job. And so almost in the gaps, I did things I wanted to do, and I learned and I read and I went to conferences when I could. And that was how I built my knowledge. And then by pure chance, we hit lockdown in 2020. And suddenly people go online. And instead of being isolated with children and so on in the corner of the world, I was right in the middle of everything and discovered that my level of knowledge was right up there and took advantage of it. So it was a really very strange decade. And it's very odd to have come out of it in the position I'm in. It really is.
Oh, that's amazing. And well done, you. In terms of those challenges around you and having to also focus on your career, I can't even imagine, because it's hard for us at the best of times to figure out what we need to do and what we should be doing, never mind in such adversity. So yeah, really well done. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about the book then. So you've launched this book about crypto. And from my basic understanding, I remember crypto was like the biggest thing. It was everywhere. Everyone was talking about it. And then ChatGPT came along and then it almost nudged it to one side in a way. And is crypto still a big thing?
Crypto is absolutely still a big thing. And I think what we need to understand is it is a thing that Gartner calls the hype cycle of technology. And every single technology that we have ever had starts life as a great idea or a problem solver or something that just suddenly appears in a lab. And we go through this cycle of going, what can we do with this thing? And it gets to the point where they call the peak of inflated expectations. And we've just gone through that with large language models. Previously, we went through that with NFTs. And before that, we went through it with the early stages of crypto. And we will keep going through that with every single technology. So crypto is very much a thing. It's just not in the way you might expect. We're not going to be buying our coffee with Bitcoin. Let's put it that way. But you're probably already using a banking system that's got crypto technology sitting underneath it somewhere. You're probably buying things in a supply chain where somewhere in the supply chain they are tracking the emissions from production and transport using blockchain. You may have a really posh handbag or a really amazing watch, and you've got a little app that gives you all sorts of benefits because you've registered as the owner. And that's because you've effectively got an NFT that represents your handbag. So it's there. It's just finding its niche. And we don't sit there at the moment going, wow, I've just sent an email and my goodness, that SMTP, what a technology. That just doesn't happen.
So now I'm going to play the role of being the really stupid person in the room, because I usually am. And I'd like you to really break this down for me. So you've got crypto, you mentioned Bitcoin. What's the difference? Are they the same thing? Are they different things? And then there's a whole bunch of others out there as well. So tell me more.
It's a nice story, and I like telling stories. So the idea of Bitcoin didn't just spring out of nowhere. A bit like artificial intelligence started in the 1950s. The inspiration that became cryptocurrency started probably late 1970s. We start to get the first research and ideas, and people start looking for a way to do peer-to-peer payments. So if you think about something like PayPal, for instance, that feels like a peer-to-peer payment, but you've got to put the money in from your bank and you've got to take it back out. Although, to be fair, in the last few weeks, they have also launched a link to crypto wallets. That's another story. So this idea of how do we do a payment from one person to another without having a bank was something that people had been looking at since the sort of mid-1980s. And of course, we rely on the bank to keep that ledger. Here comes the accountant brain again. So we're relying on the bank to say, Kate has sent Paddy £5 and I can't send it to you twice because the bank will know. And so how do you replicate that ledger in a way that people can trust? So this journey, you find there's all sorts of research and ideas and attempts to do this all the way through. And we finally get a proposition in 2008, Halloween 2008. And we get a paper called Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer system of electronic cash, I think it's called. And the idea was sound, and it picked up on all the previous research. And it said, okay, if we're not going to have somebody central, what we need is a ledger we can trust. And the way we're going to trust it is to say, we'll put all of these transactions like a page of a ledger, and we're going to close those off, cryptographically secure them, and then we're going to have an agreement with all the people who are holding a copy of the ledger that they're going to add that page. And this is now the system state. And then we've got another page of transactions and we're going to add that on. And everybody agrees that's the system state. And because there's a reference to each page going all the way back, if I went back 3 pages and went, I actually sent you £5, but we know it was 10. I can't do that because you'd have to get the system to agree. Oh, okay, we're going to change that page, which changes the next page, which changes the next page. And you can't keep up. So you get this chain of blocks of transactions. And it started off literally with, here are movements of Bitcoin value from A to B. It works in a slightly odd way around unexpired transaction values, but we'll leave that out. And so that ledger is trusted. And anyone can see it because you can interpret it on a browser, there are APIs, and no one can change it. So suddenly you've got a ledger of transactions, of movements of value that everyone can trust and nobody controls. And that was what the real breakthrough was. And so there's various sort of ideas and copies and developments of that. And we get 4 or 5 years of similar kind of things. Even Dogecoin came out at that time. It's really early when you think about the meme coin. And then in 2015, we get Ethereum, which is the next big one that everyone's heard of. And the thing with Ethereum was it said, right, we're not going to simply be moving value from one place to another. It's not just payments. What else can we do? And so they built an application layer on top. So value moves around in software applications. And these little programmable tokens that are representing value can be anything you want. And then gradually we get people going, well, if they can be anything they want, they can all be different. So we get little tokens, little coins that are different to each other. And that's what we call NFTs. It's a fungibility is the property of a coin like a dollar bill or a pound coin. And these are not fungible because they're not the same as anything else. So NFTs. So from the idea of we've got a ledger and we can trust that value has moved, then we define loads of different ways of doing value. So we've got blockchain, we've got all these different types of tokens, and we call them crypto assets is pretty much the accepted term. And suddenly they explode into programmable stuff that we can do things with. And that's when it gets really exciting.
Wow. I've never heard anyone explain it that way before, because I always get overwhelmed with all of the technical jargon that people throw at you. So thank you for that. That's making a lot of sense for me. And I'm just thinking, like, you got Bitcoin, Ethereum, you mentioned. Are they like different currencies like we have in the traditional sense, or are they platforms? What are they?
Okay, so you've got two different terms but the same word. So you talk about Bitcoin and the Bitcoin blockchain. So Bitcoin is the equivalent of money that is being moved around. You talk about Ethereum on the Ethereum blockchain. So there are many different blockchains. There are many different tokens. In terms of are they currencies, accountants don't think they are. You don't treat them as currencies. But some of them have the same properties as money, and in some places they are treated as money. So if you think about money, it's got to be a store of value, which Bitcoin and larger cryptocurrencies are. You've got to be able to pay for goods and services and settle debts with it. So a medium of exchange, store of value. Can't remember what the third one is. But there's this idea of you can pay for something. The first time somebody paid for a thing with Bitcoin was reportedly 2 pizzas for 10,000 Bitcoin in 2010. That would be worth quite a bit now. But that was the idea. You can actually pay for things. In parts of Switzerland, you can pay your municipal taxes with cryptocurrency. In El Salvador, you can pay for your vet's bills and you can pay for all sorts of things within their Bitcoin ecosystem. They actually use Bitcoin as one of their national currencies. So yes, it can be used. Different cryptocurrencies are used as if they were money. Honestly, we don't need that here in the UK and in Europe because we have really good financial services. But for people who don't, it's actually really useful.
And that's the bit that I think I struggle with, because I think in my mind, as soon as someone says cryptocurrency, I go, oh, that is money. And it's another form of money.
It's a value. It's a representation of value. That's effectively the third thing. It's a unit of account. Right. So our ledger. So you can use it as a unit of account like we do with cash. So you've got a £20 note and you can work out the accounting for that. So yeah, people talk about cryptocurrencies because they behaved like money. We now talk more about crypto assets because they behave in different ways. So cryptocurrency is one part of that family tree. So actually the new book that's coming out is getting started with cryptocurrency because everyone recognizes what that means, but it's an introduction to digital assets and to blockchain. So it's very clear. It covers the whole family tree and it covers the technology as well.
With cryptocurrency, I'm guessing the value changes over time. How is that decided in that world?
It's not decided by anybody. It's the similar question of why do tech stocks go up and down? And there are macroeconomic factors. There is confidence in the market. Actually, an interesting comparison is that with any crypto asset that is issued, there is always technology beneath it. There is some kind of reason for issuing that. So you look at what the thing actually is supposed to do as part of its software. So comparing them to tech stocks is actually quite reasonable because a lot of the value actually depends on how useful are they. And there are new blockchains being built that run incredibly fast. So, for example, it takes on average about 10 minutes to generate a block on the Bitcoin blockchain. It runs at about 7 transactions per second on average. We've got new blockchains coming out that are closing a block in less than a second, and they are processing very high numbers of transactions. So they're rivaling the Visa network and so on. And so there is a value to the coins to the crypto assets that are part of that software because it's good technology. I'm not naming any, obviously, but that's part of the valuation. So when we see the stock market go down, we often see the crypto market go down as well. When we have macroeconomic problems, sometimes crypto will come out as a potential solution. Sometimes it won't because of what the tech does. That's the basis of it.
And you mentioned a few examples there of how different countries are starting to use this technology and for almost everyday stuff, paying your taxes and things like that, which is incredible. Could you give us any more examples of how it's being used in the wider world? And I guess from a banking perspective, then, is the day of the bank done, or do you think they've still got a long life ahead of them?
Oh, the banks have a long life ahead of them, and they have a place because if you look at the central banks, they're part of the monetary stability of a country. So there are good and bad things going on in terms of the use of crypto. There is a special type of cryptocurrency called a stable coin, and these have an algorithm programmed into them that keeps them at the same value as, say, the US dollar. And that makes it very easy for people to use them because they are not volatile. They're not going up and down. You know what they're worth the next day. And you will see these. I think there's some integrated into Shopify. There's all sorts of things. And PayPal has its own stable coin and so on. But we have situations where, for example, there's a lot of problems at the moment in Nigeria because people have been using stable coins rather than the Naira because they have more access to financial services, to fintech because of that. And it has helped to devalue the Naira. Therefore, they arrested Binance officials and detained them. They have banned the exchanges. They are trying to shore up the currency. So it's not all good, but there is definitely a cry for help going on there in terms of stability and access to financial technology and opportunity. In terms of the banks, though, the idea of having a central bank digital currency is really gathering steam. So when we think we've got digital currency because we tap our phone on something and we paid for it, that's the technology underneath the bank that we bank with. So they're private commercial banks. They get given money by the central bank in order to lend and to create effectively, to manage our money and to give us the services that we want. But central banks themselves actually don't have digital money. If you think about banknotes, that's the only public central bank money that we ever touch. Everything else is private. And so the idea of having these central bank currencies has really gathered steam. And behind it all is the idea of using the same technology, of using crypto technology to build these digital currencies. So there's 130 countries currently looking at central bank digital currencies, UK, Europe. There are some that have already launched. So we have one in China, we have one Bahamas, somewhere, there's all over the place. So there's all these tests around how fast can we move money around between banks using the same kind of technology. And there are crypto companies that are within that are actually supporting the infrastructure. So they're not going to be crypto assets because they're centralized, but they're using exactly the same technology. So the banks are not going anywhere. They're using the technology. And even in the background, some are using it now. So if you do a foreign exchange transaction, sometimes there will be a little crypto token in the middle of that, flipping your pounds to dollars in one bing. If you are in the sort of background of things like interbank borrowing, there are repo settlements being done using NFTs in the background. So JP Morgan are using NFTs to do that on their Onyx platform. So there's a huge amount of interest in the technology, and it's really being exploited in a good way.
I've got a ton of questions off the back of that. I'm going to have to try and choose wisely. So as a technology professional out there that's listening to this podcast, what should we be really focused on? Because it sounds like a very big topic. There's so much to it. But what should we be really knowing that will help us in the future with crypto? I'd like to think tech people are usually ahead of the game, but most of my technology friends that I've talked to about crypto, they say, oh yeah, we dabble with NFTs and this and that, but there's no real strategy. There's no real kind of plan to say, well, this is what we should all be doing now because this is definitely coming and we should be using it in this way or that way. What advice do you have for tech people out there?
Learn about the technology and what it does. So go beyond the headlines. And yes, there are criminals who use cryptocurrency. Absolutely there are. It's easier than getting people to send dollars to a PO box in Panama, which is what ransomware used to do. Get beyond the idea of scams. Yes, there are scams. Where there is money, there are always these things. Understand a crypto token does. Understand what the blockchain offers, and look for the wicked problems that you haven't managed to solve. Things that can be made faster if they're going through a distributed ledger. Things that could be more transparent and more easily measured in that way. Things that could be tracked by using effectively a digital twin, a token that twins with the asset. Look at even, are there new markets that could open up? People talk about the metaverse. And one of the things about living having an increasingly virtual existence, and I don't mean we're all sitting in Decentraland, there's tumbleweed in there, but this idea of we're doing things on screens, we're doing things remotely. How do we prove ownership? How do we manage trust when we're not actually face to face with people? And this is the kind of technology that can be that missing piece of the jigsaw. So look beyond the headlines and see exactly what it does. And that, I hope, is what the book I've written does.
Just to give us a sneak peek in terms of some of the topics that you've covered in the book, could you just give us a quick rundown of any of the more important chapters, the areas that you think we should focus on more?
Sure. It's actually a very short and very readable book. I look at exactly what these assets are and what blockchain actually is, and I look at how it's being used. So all the different examples of how this is being used in the real world, everything from, yes, NFTs. Why are they actually useful for people? How are they being used in the back end? What's being done around supply chains, environment, climate, banking, this kind of thing. And I look at the security side, which is really important because these things are valuable and you've got to be able to protect them. You've got to understand where the attack vectors are because people like value, back to the criminals. And there is also increasingly joined up regulation around the use of both blockchain and crypto assets. And that's starting to come together in most countries. I also look at what are the considerations for straightforward business processes, things like how do you account for them? How do you manage succession or even legacy when you're dealing with crypto assets? So it's quite a broad brush around what they are, how you look after them and what you do with them, and how to do it without annoying the regulators or getting into trouble with people. And then I do a deep dive into the technology, so how do you achieve that system state? What are the consensus mechanisms? How do these things actually work? But hopefully not in too complex a way.
Oh, brilliant. And if we look at the future, how long do you think it is before this technology becomes mainstream and we're all using it in our daily lives?
I don't know that most of us will knowingly use it. I think we'll just notice that things are moving smoother or quicker, or you may find that you have. So let's see different aspects of the technology. So in terms of, say, if you're working, you are having to make decisions around, let's say, a construction project. How do you make a decision on a design change? This is something that's actually come out of the Grenfell Fire report. And that decision on the design change can now be anchored in blockchain, can be verified in detail years down the line. So this changes behavior if you actually know that what you are saying is going to be verifiable and is going to be attributable. And it makes decisions more rigorous. So you may have this slight change of behavior where you actually know that you could be held accountable, that you can actually trust the information that's coming up the supply chain to you, that you have a more transparent way of tracking. For example, there are examples around food waste where something may be moving through the supply chain, it's sitting in the corner of a warehouse, it's going rotten. When did that arrive? When did it leave? Not just the people in the warehouse can see that, everyone can see that. Where's this consignment? So we start to get more efficiency. So we're going to see changes in the way that we work and changes in the underlying systems, but we're not going to be talking about what the technology is. It's like you wouldn't say, well, we're moving from SQL to, you're not going to explain it. You're just going to say, this is how it works. And by the way, we can check that. In terms of the crypto side, we may knowingly use crypto if we are using something like PayPal. Increasingly, that is bringing crypto mainstream. Or we may just notice that things are going faster.
Wow. So I've just had like an aha moment on this episode from what you've said there, and I'm going to validate my understanding is correct. I've traditionally always thought about crypto and blockchain. It's all about money and it's all about currency. From what you're saying is that actually it's a way of validating a decision and auditing decisions. So potentially it could have nothing to do with money at all or currency. And we could be using it as a ledger for our decision making. Is that correct?
Yes, it isn't all about money, where there are private blockchains as well as public blockchains. So a public blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum, the coins are there to pay transaction fees. The coins are there to reward people for keeping the network going, for keeping it safe. So you get some newly minted coins or you get the transaction fees for being part of that network. So that's the public side. So you need the cryptocurrency there, and it has its own value and it has its own role. But the blockchains themselves, we have permissioned blockchains as well. So they don't have cryptocurrency in them. So for example, Oracle has a blockchain as a blockchain platform that uses a thing called Hyperledger, and that will, that will keep transactions, movement of assets. So it's still movement of assets. It's still movement of value, but it could be following a supply chain. It could be anchoring the fact that this fruit is Rainforest Alliance certified and it traveled in this cargo ship and it was harvested from this place and so on. And we also there is a banking system, R3 Corda, which is also a very tightly permissioned blockchain. And that was developed. They both started development around 2014. So they're very early. And there's insurance systems that are sitting on R3 Corda. There are agri-finance, trade finance systems that are sitting on that as well. And they're using exactly the same concept of it's trusted. The parties who are allowed to see it can see it. So everyone has the same golden copy of the ledger and nobody can change it. So the inconvenient truths will always be there.
Fantastic. Love it. And we're almost at the end of time, Kate. So I'm going to ask you one of my favorite questions, which is, if I could give you any superpower to abolish something in the world of work for 24 hours because we don't want to put something in the world that might have a negative impact for too long. Let's just give it a trial. What would that be?
Is an incredibly hard question because I sit in my little box a lot of the time. I would like to abolish train fares and journey times for 24 hours so that I can just zip around the country and see everybody I'm used to seeing on screen. Because while I love the virtual world, I do like that face-to-face time as well.
I love it. Yeah, that's a really interesting one. So a good friend of mine, Grant, and we run a community for visual thinkers. So we partner up quite a bit, and we're doing a talk later this year, which we still have to write. It's almost like a battle. So one of us is going to be championing face-to-face. The other is going to be championing virtual. And we're having a live kind of debate, boxing match, call it what you want. And it's going to be a really interesting battle between the two. What's your opinion on virtual generally? Would you ever go back to face-to-face full-time?
Virtual generally, I love virtual because it opens up the world and it offers so many more opportunities. Face-to-face, there is a particular spark, and I think there is a huge value in face-to-face, but it is almost now a supplement to the virtual world.
I'm flying the flag for face-to-face, by the way, so I'm going to be the face-to-face guy. So I've got to somehow really prove the value of face-to-face. So that's going to be interesting. And Kate, could you tell us a little bit more about the book, the title, when it's out, and also if you could share any more resources if people want to continue their learning journey on this topic?
So the book is Getting Started with Cryptocurrency, an Introduction to Digital Assets and Blockchain from BCS Publishing. And that comes out on the 17th of April. And you can pre-order that from BCS, from Amazon, from your local store. In terms of further reading, this is such a fast-moving area that the ongoing conferences and forums and press around crypto is often the goldmine of what is happening and what is becoming mainstream. So there are some great resources out there, and face-to-face conferences, absolutely, and virtual as well. So it really is a case of learn the basics first, work out what your interest is. So buy the book, read it, and then start searching for the people who are doing what you want to do, who are the people who are solving the problem that you have, and talk to them, join them, read about them, and just become aware of the enormous potential that is out there that is actually almost impossible to bottle in a short book.
Thank you so much, Kate. It's been a pleasure. I've learned a huge amount on this episode. I'm sure the listeners have as well. I think there were so many golden nuggets in there, and excited for the book. And wish you all the best with it and the launch.
Thank you so much, Paddy.
It's the end of another episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please do connect with me via LinkedIn and drop me a message and let me know your favorite takeaways from the episode. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Superpower School newsletter so that you can be notified of all future episodes. Simply visit the website www.superpowers.school. Thank you once again.